Okay, Toyota Hiace front wheel bearing on the two-wheel drive vans. These are super common for failing. They're also super common for seizing in the hubs. So we're going to show you a real great trick to get these out when they do seize in. But we will walk you through this whole job start to finish. To diagnose it, of course, jacked up, spin the wheel, you'll hear it, you'll hear the rumbling, you'll also feel it if you put your hand on the suspension. Okay, so it's basically any of that shape van. So first step here is we are going to get rid of our steering tie rod end, which of course means taking the split pin out first, and then undoing the nut, and then we need to break the ball joint. So what we do first is we just thread our nut back on to the tie rod end, few threads, and it's just to protect that thread while we swing with the hammer, because we will be hitting on the side where that fits into the hub. To pop that down, sorry some of the camera angles aren't great. I'm working with a new camera that I attached to myself, and this is my first video I've made with it. So next step, remove the brake caliper, so just do the main cradle bolts. Get those off of there, and then you are going to want a hook to hang that caliper up with, because we don't want that weight hanging on the brake hose. Bonus tip for making hooks for hanging calipers: old tent pegs that are a bit bent or they're just too thin and too useless, bend them back the other way and make them into a double-ended hook for your brake calipers. Okay, so then we have 4 bolts in the back of the hub. We're just going to undo those, and because we have that steering arm off now, it's easy just to flip this thing round in both directions. Get at all the bolts. So this one actually isn't seized in the hub, but I'll show you the method anyway. Normally if I had one seized, I'd also get that ABS sensor out of the way. I'd undo the 2 bolts on that and just get it well out of the way so it doesn't accidentally get hit with the hammer. Okay, but what we have is a couple of old head bolts. Okay, so they're the same thread as the ones we just took out, only they're longer. And I just have 2 of them, put them on a diagonal, 1 in each corner. Okay, and then you can smack those as hard as you like with a hammer, and that is how you get the seized ones out. You generally don't damage the threads, but it doesn't matter if you do, because they're getting replaced with the new bearing anyway. But we need the longer bolts, so that's one reason we use the other bolts, but also the heads of the bolt get damaged, and we don't want to do that to our good bolts. Cool, so then thread those out, and then we can pull the hub out. Here's another spot with the camera where I missed a bit. Oh, hang the backing plate up on the hub there, where we took the tie rod end off from. We'll find out why a little bit later. But what I'm doing here is I am just taking the bolts out of the brake disc where it bolts onto the back of the hub. Okay, and then we chuck this up on the bench, and we need to work this disc off here. So you just need to move it around to get it past the hub. The easiest way to do it is to do one side and then the other, so working with the longer side rather than the shorter ends. Do one side and then the other. It's quite easy. And then this is what we have left. We throw it in the vise here, and we need to get this nut off the back, so we'll need to just punch out where it's locked into the groove, and then we use a cold chisel in the holes in it just to spin it round to loosen it, and then I just chuck a pin punch in one of the holes and whip that off there, and then the ABS ring slides right off. And then we're onto our press. Okay, so at this point you're going to need a press. If you're at home you don't have one, then you might need to take it into an engineer or a mechanic to have this part of the job done for you, and just take the new bearing in and get them to change it over. Okay, but we're going to press just that center hub out, And normally when you do this, the outer bearing will still be on the hub. So we're just going to grab a screwdriver and a hammer, and we're just going to break the cage of it, and that's just so we can get rid of all the bearings out of there, chuck them in the bin. That's all rubbish. Okay, and that will leave us with some lips on the inner race, and we are going to put a bearing puller on there to go in our press. So I am moving quite fast in this video because I am at work and I am busy, so in a hurry to get this done, and just tighten it up on there under that top lip, and then that goes back in our press and we press that out. Now if you can't press it out, you can cut it. You can use the angle grinder to very carefully cut it and then break it with the cold chisel to get that to move. And we press that out. You could potentially cut the whole bearing off, but you're still going to need a press to put the new one on anyway, so might as well get someone else to do it. And then we're just going to clean up the face, the back of the face of that inner hub, just where the seal of the bearing is going to run, and we're going to put a bit of rubber grease on that seal. Specifically rubber grease, not ordinary grease, so it doesn't ruin the rubber, and it just helps to stop any squeaking from a dry seal. Okay, back in the press, of course making sure when we're pressing the new bearing on that we're putting the pressure onto the inner race of the bearing, okay, as it goes down. You don't want to push on the outside of the bearing while the resistance is on the inner race, so you damage the new bearing. Cool, and we press that right on all the way, and then we slide our ABS ring back on. Definitely don't forget that or you'll regret it. And then we do our nut back up, basically the same way we undid it. Chuck a pin punch in one of the holes, spin it up, and then cold chisel in one of the holes, and a hammer just to tighten it. Basically just as tight as you can. You reach a point where you sort of can't tighten it anymore, and that's how tight you want it to be. And then of course you need to bend that edge of that thread back into the groove to lock it. Okay, and then our disc goes back on, same as before, working the sides first, and then we will put the bolts back in the back of there. I like to put Loctite on these bolts as well. Okay, if you don't have a gun, you're going to be doing it by hand and trying to hold onto that disc and do it up. Need to be reasonably tight. I use this gun because I know exactly how tight it does them up on a certain setting, and that's how tight I want them. Cool, and then we're going to get a bit of copper coat and we're going to put it around the outer edge of that bearing where it fits into the hub, and that's just to stop it seizing in there in the future and causing somebody else a headache, or even us if this van is back in years to come and we need to do another one. Okay, and then Loctite also the bolts that hold the hub in. Our 4 main bolts there, and remember we hung that up there. The reason we did that is so you don't forget to put it back on. You don't leave it on a bench somewhere and put this back together and realise you've left the backing plate off. Cool, and we're actually going to use our head bolts again because they're slightly longer, just to get this all lined up. So it makes it easier because they can reach out further, because you're lining up the backing plate and the hub as well, and once the hub is in there it sticks. It's hard to turn, so do it up nice and loose, and once you get those bolts started you can shove it into place and then take those bolts out and replace them with the proper bolts for holding the hub in, as well as the other two. Then we're doing those up. And of course we are checking them by hand to make sure that they are nice and tight. Okay, and then we need to clean our brake disc. So I always clean the back first and then the front. And the reason we do this is to make sure that there's no grease or dirt or anything that either our hands have put on the disc or while it's been on the bench that it's picked up, because we don't want any of that stuff contaminating our brake pads and causing them to be less effective. So of course we're using brake clean to do this with. You don't want to use any degreasers or anything, only brake clean and a clean rag. So get that all nice and clean, and then our caliper is ready to slide back on. So we unhook it. Don't forget to take your hook off the vehicle or you'll lose it. Bolts back in. Loctite on these bolts as well. And when you're applying Loctite, you just need a small drop just at the beginning of the thread. So as it threads in, it'll push it up the rest of the thread. You don't need to do heaps on there. And of course, we are also checking these by hand, making sure that they are nice and tight. And then our steering arm goes back in with the nut on. Do that up. And then again, of course, we are checking this by hand, and of course we need to make sure that our castle nut lines up with the hole for a new split pin. Okay? Don't go reusing split pins because you damage them when you're getting them out. So brand new split pin. If you don't have them, if you're working at home, just go and buy something. They're super cheap. Okay, and then we are throwing our wheel back on. A super quick version. Okay, and then last step as always, spin the wheel. One, you want to make sure that the new wheel bearing is good, but two, you also want to make sure that your backing plate hasn't bent or something and it's rubbing on the wheel or the brake disc. So thanks for watching. I hope this has helped you out today. Don't forget to click a like and subscribe for more tips from Real Mechanics.